Hey, we're in this series called Faith Over Fear, and it all stems around this idea that doubt can grow the strongest faith. Doubt can grow the strongest faith. And maybe you're here, and we have a lot of people that come to Cornerstone, and they're just searching. Maybe it's like, not necessarily like you didn't grow up in church, but you stopped going a long time ago. Maybe it was like once you got on your own, you stopped, going. That was like church for your parents or whatever, and now you've been coming back to it. You're kind of seeing, is God really something that you can follow in your own life? Is this faith thing actually real? And you have so many doubts, you have so many questions when it comes to Christianity or faith, and what we have seen through this series is that those doubts, those questions can actually help you have even stronger faith. And last week, Pastor Colin, I think, did an incredible job as he talked about what does it look like when Christians do a bad job representing Jesus and the gospel and Christianity, and they let you down. And I thought he did a fantastic job in saying that, like, too often we have put our faith towards people rather than centering it on God where it should be. And today, that's what we're going to be talking about as we continue this idea that Jesus is the only way to God. And I want you to kind of consider some of these facts that we're going to talk about today. There will be a thought here in our society that there are many ways to God. And I'm here to let you know, regardless of where you're at and what you believe, I'm here to challenge you on that thought process, that there is only one way to God, and it's through Jesus. As a matter of fact, Jesus said it this way himself. He told Thomas and the rest of the disciples, he says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. Jesus said, I am the only way to God. As a matter of fact, we know that because he would ultimately give his life as the ultimate sacrifice by giving his life, taking our place. And the amazing thing about this faith that we can have through Jesus is that it's an inclusive offer. It's for anybody, but it's exclusively through Jesus. It's an inclusive offer for anybody, but it's exclusively only available through Jesus. There are multiple religions, there are multiple faiths out there, there are multiple thought processes. And in our society, even being here in the Bible Belt, you're gonna find that gets challenged, that gets questioned over and over again. Surely there are multiple ways. You know some great people. You know some good moral people who follow a different faith, who practice something differently, and you think, like, surely maybe they're gonna be okay, and they believe that if they're sincere enough, if they're devout, maybe you've heard this phrase, hey, they're a devout person. If they're devout enough, if they pray enough, that ultimately God will let them in one day because they were a good person while they lived here on this world. But here's the thing, at the end of this life, people believe whether you get into heaven or it's some sort of nirvana or some sort of higher consciousness or whatever, it all comes down to how do you live right here on earth? The multiple religions that you can research will all come down to, well, how were you when you were living right here on this planet? How good were you at keeping the rules? How good at you were being a moral person? How good at you were you at loving? And then you have New Ageism that just says, there's not really like heaven or whatever. It's more about like your inner self. Find inner peace. Find that higher consciousness. Accelerate your mind to new levels that you have never been before. And again, it all comes down to what you have to do. If you can find these things, then you can unlock this place that you only dreamed you could be. And then outside of the multiple religions, multiple faiths, multiple thought processes, then you have atheists. Now, atheists obviously believe that nothing's gonna happen when you die. You die, that's it. You're born and then you're buried and nothing happens. Out of all the faiths that are out there, excluding the Christian faith, I believe atheists have the greatest faith of them all. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron because you're like, atheists don't have faith. That's why they're an atheist. But I think they actually have great faith because it takes so much faith to believe that nothing's gonna happen when you're gonna die. How much faith do you have to have? How much stock do you have to put into your thought that nothing's gonna happen when I die? What do you have to tell yourself to actually get yourself to believe that? When you're laying down at night and you know there's got to be something else out there, you just shove it down and say, no, there can't possibly be anything else. I also believe this about atheists. I don't feel like you can say you're an atheist until you have researched every single religious system and faith system out there to make sure that you know that these things aren't possibly right. Until you've researched all the scientific facts that we know about the universe and our world and how everything was created or whatever, until you have researched all of it, and then put to 100% proof and tested your theories and all this stuff and come to the conclusion that after studying everything, I have realized that none of this is actually possible and you really are just material matter. You are born and then you die and that's it. Until you have done that, you really can't claim to be an atheist. That's a foolish person actually to believe in something without even actually studying anything. You'd be an idiot. And no one wants to be an idiot. And so let's think about this really quickly. If you were actually to study it, you find most atheists who begin to actually research and study, they will move the pendulum a little bit and they become what they would call an agnostic. There's something out there, they just don't even know what it is. In the scientific world, we would call those people intelligent design believers because they used to believe that everything just happened, but then when they look at all of everything, there's like, man, this is really difficult, but I don't want to say it's God. So something out there did this intelligent design. And so when you think through it, then you can only do that, right? But Christianity is different. Christianity centers around the fact that there is a personal God who loves you and I unconditionally, so much so that he sent his son Jesus to become human being, to become one of us. Jesus gave his life. And so today I'm just going to have you consider 3 thoughts today, all right? 3 thoughts in regards to the Christian faith. We could talk about all the other faiths that are out there, but I want you just to consider these things because ultimately, if you can just prove that these things are not true, then we're honestly all wasting our time here today. There are better things we could be doing on a Sunday than just showing up for something that is fake. But here's 3 thoughts I want you to think through today. I want you to consider Jesus' ministry, his ministry. This is a little bit different here, but if you think about it, Jesus loved people. And when Jesus was born and when he began to do his ministry, he lived in a day and age where the religious people who had the connection to God hated most people. As a matter of fact, if you're just a regular person like you or I, unless you're just forking a ton of money over into the temple, you were really a nobody. I mean, if you had something wrong with you, if you had a family member that had messed up, they had done some things wrong or whatever, you would be an outcast. And the religious people actually wanted nothing to do with you. We would call those people, they were actually Pharisees in the Bible. They were the religious leaders. They were like the pastors. They were the ones who should be leading the people towards God. As a matter of fact, they excluded so many people from God. They felt superior than everybody else. Maybe you've been around a religious person like that before. They have like this some sort of like, they think they're better than you. It's like, what, because you go to church, you're better than me? Or just because you dress, you think you're better than me? You've been around someone like that? That's how these Pharisees were. They rejected the outcast, and it was like you could show up to church, but they would ignore you. You ever been in that situation before? I'll never forget that. Like I was in Bible college, and I was going to visit my sister. She lived in a different state, and she was going to a different Bible college. And like I went to what I would say like is a conservative Bible college. Like we had like 11 p.m. curfew, all right? We had to dress certain things. Like on days it was chapel, we had to wear ties, all right, if you're a dude. All right, so like this was crazy. Like I say, like I went to conservative school, all right? My sister went to like what I would call a very legalistic school. So it was like 3 steps like even more conservative. And I remember showing up. It was a Wednesday night to church, and I was wearing jeans, and I was wearing like a polo. I felt like this is pretty good for a Wednesday night. You know what I'm saying? I was one of, and I counted 5 people that night, boys, males, who were not in a suit and tie. Let me tell you something. One person talked to me that night, and that was my sister. You ever been in a place where you were ignored by everybody else? The place that's supposed to be the most loving was the most rejecting? That's how it was with the Pharisees. But Jesus comes along, and he's loving people. One of my favorite verses in all of the New Testament is when this happens in Mark chapter 2. It says, when the teachers of the religious law, they were the Pharisees, they saw Jesus eating with tax collectors, and these would be Jewish people who had now working for the Roman government. So it's like they were traitors. They were tax collectors and other sinners, everyone else in the room. They asked his disciples, why does he, Jesus, eat with, listen to the words they call him, such scum? What? They were repulsed. How could you sit at the table of this person? Now think of like, we're in the, we're gonna vote later on this year, right? Maybe. Think about the most repulsive person you could ever sit at the table with. Maybe it's a politician to you, or maybe it's like your mother-in-law. I don't know, okay? Think of the most repulsive person that you could sit down and share a meal with. That's what Jesus was doing. And these religious leaders like, how does he even sit with such scum? But listen what happens, verse 17. It says, when Jesus heard this, he told them, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I have not come to call those, this is important, this phrasing, who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. Jesus said, you know, it's interesting that you say that because I actually didn't come for people who think they have this moral superiority, this religious superiority to just regular. I came to people who know they're broken. I came to people who know that there's no way they could get to God. I came for people who thought that God didn't love them. Those are the very people that I came for, broken people just like you and just like me. Those are the people that Jesus came for. And when you think about his ministry, everything showed this God that you've been hearing about your whole life is totally different than the God that you have seen act out in front of you. No, this God is personal, and he loves you so much that I am here right now to be among you. Think of Jesus' ministry. He healed people who were blind, they could see. People who were deaf, they could hear. If you were paralyzed, you could walk. He brought people back from the dead. He literally multiplied food and fed thousands upon thousands of people. He walked on water, miracle after miracle. He cast out demons. I mean, no other person has ever done this before, ever. And if you think about it, the Pharisees, they never questioned his miracles. They always questioned how he was doing it, but they never questioned the fact that this actually happened. So you need to understand, like, Jesus actually did these things. No one is debating, like, well, Jesus didn't heal that person. This guy was blind his entire life. He could see. This person could never walk. What do you think? This is like the greatest prop of all time. Like, hey, listen, this is the biggest hustle. So your whole life, you're going to pretend to be paralyzed, okay? Never use your legs. All right, this would be great. But one day, about 40 years from now, there's going to be a guy named Jesus. I know it's weird, but then he's going to come and he's going to say you could walk. And then 40 years from now, you can now use your legs. That's ridiculous, right? And yet Jesus actually did it because it really happened. But what you know with the Pharisees is that this is what they did to Jesus. They didn't question his miracles. They just wanted it to stop. Every time Jesus did something, more and more people said, whoa, wait, maybe I want to hear about this God that Jesus, he talks about him like he knows him. I want to know more about this Jesus too. And maybe you're like me, you're here today, you've experienced Jesus personally in a powerful way. His ministry. Consider his ministry. Here's the second thought. Consider Jesus' resurrection. And we're going to talk about this more next week when we discuss like science and all these scientific facts versus faith. We'll talk about this a little bit more next week. But Jesus' resurrection, you take away the resurrection, then you take away the fact that faith is real. Christianity is real. And this is why we celebrate Easter, not because it's like, hey, look at this. No, we celebrate Easter because we believe Jesus rose from the dead. There was a body in the grave 3 days later. It's not there anymore. You can search the entire world for the bones of Jesus. You're never going to find it. Ever, you will never, ever find it. Jesus became literal sin. God turns his back. He goes into a brand new tomb. It was covered up, and 3 days later, he was gone. And I love what Paul says in Acts chapter 3. He says, you killed the author of life. He's talking to the religious leaders. He says, but God raised him from the dead, and we are the witnesses of this fact. In other words, he said, hey, Jesus was dead. We saw him dead. I mean, he was dead. You can't get any deader than the dead that he was dead, all right? And then we saw him alive again, and he is now with God. Now, you want me to believe that 11 uneducated men could pull off an Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, or Ocean's 13 type heist. They took on Roman guards with no weapons. All right, mind you, these guys, they did not have an education, no weapons, and then in total secret took Jesus' body and hid it for no one to ever find it ever. It's like, I'm gonna say it. All right, so it's like we're in Alabama, so we can say this, right? Imagine like the most 11 rednecks you've ever been around in your entire life. Yo, I think we should just take that statue right there. You know what I mean? Like, you don't think I will? I will, boy. Let's back up that 4x4, right? They load it up. It's like, we're gonna hide this thing. Old Billy Jean got that thing out there, you know, he got that 50 acres, ain't nobody gonna be out there. We just bury it, right? We just put it in the ground. And can you imagine, like now they're gonna keep that a secret, right? It's our little joke, you know what I mean? Just this and us and our Coors Light, you know what I mean? We ain't telling nobody, right? So now it's buried. I'm feeling it today. Okay, so all right, so then what happens, right? What happens? Let's just say like they start throwing some of those guys in jail because this statue's gone. It's like, hey, we know that you guys were eyeballing. We ain't eyeballing no statue. Well, all right, they start throwing some guys in jail. Like, I ain't saying nothing. When snitches get stitches, right? We ain't saying nothing. So they don't say that. But then what happens is they start killing a couple guys, right? Boom. Oh, you don't know, you're not going to tell us the statue? Boom, dead, gone, right? Just imagine we're like a totally different, like, bam, dead, gone. Second guy, boom, dead, gone. You're going to tell us? But if it gets to me, I'm like, yo, I'll tell you, listen, we went out there, Billie Jean played. You just go out there, you dig we got about 3 feet, honestly. That's all we could do. We was drunk, you know. And then you going to find the statue right there. Because I ain't dying for something that dumb. And so you want me to believe that the disciples who were uneducated took on Roman guards, moved the stone, took the body of Jesus, hid it somewhere where no one would ever find it, and then they start killing them. And then they still kept the lie? Oh, you'd have to have great faith to believe that, because I'm not dying for a lie. And neither would these guys. As a matter of fact, every single of the 11 disciples were martyred for their faith except for one. And he had to live out his entire life in exile on the Isle of Patmos, and that's the disciple John. And so what I'm telling you is when you think about the resurrection of Jesus, there's no way that isn't true, because no one will die for that fact. And here we are, 2024, over 2,000 years later, still celebrating and worshiping the risen Savior. Here's our third thought. Consider Jesus' message. Should I do that second service? Because I just made that up right there. You know what I mean? So, okay. All right. I'm just asking. I don't even know if we're going to stream this service, all right? I was just feeling it right there in the moment, all right? Consider Jesus' message, all right? So we're thinking about his ministry, the things he actually did. We're thinking about his resurrection, the thing that actually happened. And now we're going to talk about like his message. Remember, John, we were just saying how he was exiled on the Isle of Patmos. Listen to what he writes in his letter, 1 John 4. He says, this is how we know if they have the Spirit of God. So in other words, now we're thinking about the message of Jesus. How do we know if we can trust what someone says about Jesus? He says, if a person claiming to be a prophet acknowledges that Jesus Christ came in a real body, that person has the Spirit of God. So John, as he's talking, says, hey, listen, when you get around preachers, when you get around people who profess to talk about God, if they acknowledge that Jesus was really a human being, that's one way to know if he's actually telling the truth. He says, because we've seen the human being, Jesus, and we know that he is God. As a matter of fact, he actually wrote this in the Gospel of John. He doesn't use his name. He will say the disciple whom Jesus loved, but that's actually written by John as well. And listen to what he writes in John chapter 1. He says, in the beginning, the Word, it's a capital W, already existed. In other words, at the very beginning of all time, he said the Word was already alive. The Word was with God, and the Word, this is important, was God. The Word, what is the Word? It says the Word was God. And then it says this in verse 10. So he, the Word, came into the very world that he created. But the world didn't recognize him because the world had never seen God face to face before. And then here in verse 14, so the Word became human He made his home among us, and he was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. Jesus was the Word that existed before all time, who took on a human form, just like you and I, lived this perfect life, being fully God and fully man. When you think about any other religious belief today, they were all founded by a human being. Christianity is the only faith that was founded by someone who claimed not only to be fully human, but fully God at the same time. No other faith system says that. So either that is real or Jesus was crazy. No one can say, I am God and I am human. All the people that have said that, they've all died. And so has their movement. But yet something was different with Jesus. And his mission wasn't just to redeem mankind. His mission was to redeem the entire world. He didn't just come exclusively for the Jews, like the Jews thought. Jesus came to rescue the world so that you and I could have a relationship with Jesus. So at the end of it all, let's just still say you listen to these three thoughts and you go, you know what, Daniel, I still don't believe any of that. All right, I still don't believe in heaven. Okay, well, what do you believe? What is your thought process? What is the meaning to life? Because here at the end of it all, one day, you are going to die. That's going to happen. And regardless of what you believe when you die, one day you'll stand before God. Whether you believe it or not, it's going to happen. And in that moment, what do you believe? Because you can fill your whole life with love, joy, happiness, money, accomplishments, friendships, whatever. You can fill your whole life with anything that you can that this world has to offer, and it's still going to leave an emptiness, a void in your soul, because it's something that only God can fill, and that's through a relationship with him. And Jesus isn't just something we add into our life. He isn't just something we sprinkle in or go, hey, this is a fun thing that I do. No, we have centered our lives here at Cornerstone. We say we build our life on Jesus. He is the foundation, the core of everything that we believe. He is the way, the truth, and the life. See, as a pastor, I'm flawed. And you might be like, Pastor, I'm flawed. I've messed up. You have no idea what I've done. The reason why you've avoided church is because you feel like you can't be in church. Your life decisions from your past, you're just like, God could never forgive me. And there's nothing you can do about it because it's not about what you do. It's about what's already been done for you. So listen to this. I think this is so powerful. There was a guy named Paul, and he writes this to a church in Rome, and he says it this way in Romans chapter 3. He says, but God has shown us a way to be made right with him without keeping the requirements of the law as was promised in the writings of Moses and the prophets long ago. In other words, he says hey, God gave us a way for you and I to be made right to God without having to keep a bunch of rules. Because I don't know about you, I tend to be a rule breaker. I tend to cross the line a little bit, just trying to see how far I can toe the line there. And it says here that God made a way for us without having to try to keep all these rules. And he says in verse 22, we are made right with God, how? By placing our faith in Jesus Christ. And this is true for who? Everyone who believes, no matter who we are. It does not matter what you have done. It does not matter where you have been. It does not matter what life decisions you have made. It doesn't matter what mistakes you've done. It doesn't matter what you said. It doesn't matter how you've hurt someone. It says that it's there for anyone who believes. Verse 23 says, everyone has sinned. We all fall short of God's glorious standard. God demands perfection. We will never reach it. That's why we can't ever do enough. We will always fall short. Yet, God in his grace freely makes us right in his sight. He did this, how? Through Jesus Christ, when he freed us from the penalty for our sins. Well, how did he do that? God presented Jesus as the sacrifice for sin. People are made right with God, how? When they believe that Jesus sacrificed his life, that he shed his blood. This sacrifice shows that God was being fair when he held back and did not punish those who sinned in time past. Listen to this in verse 26, because this is where you and I are included in the scriptures. Isn't this cool that over a couple thousand years ago, you were written in the scriptures? Verse 26, for he, God, was looking ahead and including them. You and I are them. Including them in what he would do in this present time. God did this to demonstrate his righteousness, for he himself is fair and just, and he makes sinners right in his sight when they believe in Jesus. Listen, it's never about what you do. It's already about what's been done. And today, no matter how jacked up you think you are, you can have a relationship with God through Jesus. And it's just in this moment of just admitting that Jesus died on a cross and took your place, became your penalty, your punishment, and believing in Jesus that he died and he shed his blood for you, believing in Christ that he'll rescue you, allows you now a pathway to God so you can have that relationship with him. It's already been done. And all you have to do is believe. No magic prayer, not about raising your hand, but right there in your chair, you're a brand new person. Hey, let's pray together.